So I think we don't quite understand how fast that's going to happen.
If technology is increasingly getting commoditized,
Yes.
if intelligence is increasingly getting commoditized, how do we as investors, builders, founders think about this problem? And are there any businesses or things that we can build that will have moats, defensibility, that have differentiation from others?
Trust is the only way you can get to long-term defensible businesses. So I think trust is actually fairly easy, but we have to intellectualize it in order for us to be able to build systems around it. I think trust is two things. The first thing is competence, but the second piece is also important, and it's much, much harder to do, and it's also much, much easier to do. It's I've got your back.
Your argument is technology is allowing for those deep conversations to happen at scale, but also arguably at low cost to the machines. And as such, there's surely an opportunity here to build a relationship with someone and build trust over time. And that trust will allow the machines to learn more about you. As you said, you also can choose which machine you talk to, right?
Yes.
So you want to choose to the one that is both competent, but also that you have trust with. Hi Peng, how are
Hello. Good.
you? Good?
A bit tired,
A
but
little
good.
tired?
Yeah.
I know, it's Monday night.
Yes.
Appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Likewise.
So I guess, today we're gonna double down on a topic that I think you are particularly passionate about. But let's recap maybe for the audience's sake
Yes,
what we
let's
have talked
do that,
about today, right? So in our first podcast, I think we shared our view of the world. And, two themes that came up. One was AI doing efficiency. So AI, as a technology helping us get more efficient at doing
More
things.
cheaper, faster, better.
Cheaper, faster, better. So be it in the field of research, be it in the field of copywriting, be it in the field of doing our homework.
Art.
Of art, yes.
Yeah.
Cheaper, better, faster. The second theme we talked about was AI doing AI, right?
Yes.
And then that's the idea that AIs themselves can be given the problem to solve and actually create the solutions themselves rather than
To improve the next generation of AI.
to improve the next generation of AI, rather than humans necessarily giving it discrete problems and solving it themselves.
Or humans building AIs. I think the big difference, although it's more of the same, is AI being efficient in something. When AI is being efficient on AI, it starts this huge, in computer science we call it recursion, of software that keeps improving itself very, very quickly. So I think we don't quite understand how fast that's going to happen
Absolutely.
when it does.
Absolutely. And I think the last time we spoke, in our estimation, this could be happening anytime in the next couple of years. And
It's happening.
It's coming sooner than we think.
Yeah.
And so, it's, I think as builders and as technology enthusiasts, we're very excited about this.
Yes.
But it also poses a question, right?
Yes.
If technology is increasingly getting commoditized,
Yes.
if intelligence, whatever that means, is increasingly getting commoditized, how do we as investors, builders, founders think about this problem? And are there any businesses or things that we can build that will have moats, defensibility, that have differentiation from others?
Yeah, I started this inquiry into the nature of AI and how it affects the value creation process that we go through as entrepreneurs and that we invest in as VCs, etc. And I started to wonder, since everything is commoditized, are the only businesses we can build from here on out, are they going to be just cost plus businesses, utility-like commoditized businesses, and someone can compete with you so long as they get enough capital, right? The tradition of tech is you want to build something that's proprietary, that people can't just copy you because you've got something that they don't have in terms of knowledge, right? If knowledge gets commoditized, if the value of knowledge starts to approach zero, what can you build that's defensible, right?
Maybe just so everyone understands, right? Like, I think it would be helpful to give an example of something that we used to think of as non-commoditizable that's become commoditized, right? I think one thing you mentioned to me before is like IP
Yes.
or like inventions
Yes.
becoming commoditized, and those
Yeah.
things that we thought were special or unique and of
Yeah.
high value.
I'll use an example in one of my companies, right? We spent years building this software that allows you to manage terabytes of content, right? And make sure that your website doesn't come up with a bunch of jumbled errors, etc. And that software took us years to build, right? You of course, it's copyrighted, so the competitor can't just copy the software and sell that, right? So they have to spend years building it if they wanted to build it. Well, what if we had an AI that you could push a button and say, build that software, right?
Which is already happening.
Yes, it's already.
Yep.
And so the value of knowledge starts to decline.
Although one could argue that regulations might start, still hold some of these things in place, right? So, no,
Yeah.
you don't buy that argument?
I think it's difficult. If you think about why a government grants someone a monopoly over some idea, some novel idea that they created, it's because it took time and money and energy to create that idea, and that idea creates some benefits in the economy, right? So you get to invest in it and then reap the benefits of that investment. I think I made this point in the last podcast. If that creation of that novelty is 5 minutes of compute, right? Why should you get a monopoly over it, right? And what if you keep throwing out these novel ideas and trying to register them all the time, right? And do you get a monopoly over an area of ideas that everyone could actually create if they had the AI, right?
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. The time it takes is much shorter. The value that you might assign to it may also change.
Yes.
And honestly, for any regulator, it's going to get really hard to differentiate between original and not original too,
Yes.
right? I was just thinking about the Robin Thicke song that was basically accused of being a Marvin Gaye song.
Yeah.
And they do sound kind of similar. Not that I'm an expert at this, but you can imagine that if there's so many iterations of this,
Yes.
it's going to be very hard for any court to actually say what is the original and what isn't.
That's
I guess
right.
AI may have to come into play to differentiate.
Well, you know, there's someone, I forgot the name of that person. He got tired of some 4 or 5 notes being copyrighted by some song, so he wrote an AI to generate all the possible combinations that were not part of some body song.
Interesting.
And then just put it in public domain.
Interesting.
So you can't copyright a few note riff now because it's public domain.
This is like the arms race for originality
Yes.
in the future. That'll be really interesting.
But I do think the copyright system has to rethink how it's being implemented, because it won't make sense anymore. The problem is novelty, novel ideas, creative ideas that actually benefit society, etc., will be very cheap to produce, right? So how can you treat it the same way as when it took 10 years of research to
Absolutely.
create, right?
So in that world where novelty is now, we keep saying commoditized, but it's commonplace, I guess.
Yes.
What are your views on what will retain value amidst all this destruction?
So that's the thing I started to think about, right? I started to look at my world going, poof, you can't get anything proprietary anymore, right? Anything that's defensible beyond a few hours even, right? Because someone pressing the button on their AI could create the same thing as what you just created. So I thought a lot about it, and I realized there was one thing that is almost by definition not going to change, and that is the proprietary information on people. And why is that important? Well, because it all comes down to creating products for people, and if you have proprietary information on people, then you can create something differentiated, better for that person, right? So that's a little bit theoretical, but imagine, for example, a headhunter that's spoken to you for 10 years versus someone you just met, right? The first headhunter is going to be able to help place you in a job much better than the second that you just met, right? That's just an example. But what I realized is that you need to get information on people. But what's the big deal? Google figured this out. Facebook figures this out. I think there are two ways to get this proprietary information. The first way is you spy on them, right? And the second way is they trust you and they give it to you, right? I don't think the first way is sustainable. Talk to folks in Google, Facebook, etc. I think they are all beginning to realize that. So it's only the second way that would be sustainable, right? And almost by definition, because it's proprietary information and because it's people, you can't just give it away. You can have that as your defensible asset.
All right, let me double click on a couple of things that you said,
Sure.
just to make sure that I and also everyone else listening understands. So you said proprietary information about people is what will make you, will give you an edge, arguably, in this commoditized intelligence world, right? And I guess examples of companies that have that proprietary information today would be companies like Google, who may know your search history, Facebook that might know who who you spend time looking at profiles of.
So yes, they do have proprietary information on us, a lot of it, and from that information they can infer a lot of things. But actually, the information they have is what I call observable information. So they spy on us, right? Or they observe us. We give them permission to spy on us. So they observe us, but they don't talk to us.
That's true. They
right?
don't talk to us.
So let me give you an example of a situation, a scenario we talked about with one of our finance company. Right? So we're helping kids plan their finances, and as an example, we talk about a kid that wants to save enough to buy a house by the time he's 30 years old, right? Now, that would be sort of observable, or you can just fill out a form and want to buy a house by the time 30 years old as a form filling goals clarification sort of process, right? But if you're actually talking to the kid, you can ask more detailed questions like, why do you want to buy a house by the time you're 30? Why don't you just rent, etc.? And then the kid could come up with a response like, well, my mom's living in a shack and I want to really give her a better place to live in. Suddenly you've gone from this very transactional world to this purpose of life kind of conversation, right? And then that's totally missing from the observational information that the spying type applications do, right? I mean,
just to play devil's advocate,
Sure.
though, if you don't mind, I think sometimes you may not even realize certain things about yourself, right?
Yes.
Or you might not admit certain things
Yes.
to yourself, right? So, for example, maybe I'm someone who says, "Oh, I'm very monogamous," or like I'm very interested in AI, but in my free time, really, I'm looking at many other boys, or maybe I don't actually read anything about AI, right? And so my reading history or my search history might actually differ with my identification of myself.
Yes, you're right. And that's when the observable information is actually sometimes stronger than the
self-professed information
stuff. But what I'm talking about is conversations that you have with close friends.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
So can we engage using AI in deep conversations about meaning and purpose and goals with people? Right? And I think we can. I think there's enough stuff going on now, we can safely say this is happening, whether we like it or not.
And I guess maybe 10 years ago, right, when we tried to talk to Siri, we
turn on the lights.
We wouldn't have, forget about meaningful, but we wouldn't have much of a conversation with them,
we
right?
still don't.
Yeah. But these days, I think, you hear stories about how people are having meaningful conversations with ChatGPT. There was an article the other day in New York Times about how someone fell in love with ChatGPT. Now, it was programmed for her preferences. So she wanted ChatGPT to talk to her in a certain way. right? But that being said, it over time she found herself talking more to that than her boyfriend, I think.
Yes. Yes. That's things that we need to worry a little bit about.
Yeah. But I think the point is, I guess your point is that we can find more interesting and meaningful and I guess deeper information about someone by asking them directly.
Yeah, and having a deeper dialogue.
Conversation, maybe a longer conversation with them. Yes. And in the past, that I guess wasn't even really possible with the technology.
We didn't have the technology.
We didn't have the technology to have a conversation with us, right?
The relationships we have, even CRM, right? Customer relationship management system, right? The R is actually a transactional R, meaning we actually didn't have a relationship.
That's true.
We just managed their information.
That's true. If you think about HubSpot and Salesforce, not to denigrate the amazing work that they've done, but it's really about sending you email notifications when something happens, right? Yeah. Rather than really having a conversation or meaningful relationship for that matter with you. Okay, interesting. So you're saying, just to make sure I understand, that there are companies who have information on you, but it was done through indirectly, so one could argue they were spying on you, and secondly, they certainly weren't having deep, meaningful conversations with you, so they may not be able to probe into your motivations, the nuances, and ask you follow-up questions and so forth. So that's something that is only possible today. And so because that's possible, and because you think that's important, therefore that is what you think will help build moats going forward.
And I'm saying something very specific. Trust is the only way you can get to long-term defensible businesses.
All right, I think for everyone's sake, trust is one of these words that everyone hears and sort of understands, but never really understands. You might mean something different from me, I guess. How would you define trust?
So I think trust is actually fairly easy. But we have to intellectualize it in order for us to be able to build systems around it. I think trust is two things. The first thing is competence, right? You know what the heck you're talking about, right? Whatever you say is probably correct. That's competence. I think that's baseline requirements in businesses today, especially with AI. And you can't be doing things that are wrong. Right? You just won't last as a business. But the second piece is also important, and it's much, much harder to do, and it's also much, much easier to do. It's I've got your back. It's harder to do if you look at the lens of your business through the traditional transactional blitzscaling kind of view of the tech world, because how do you have someone's back, right? All you're trying to do is push transactions through your system. But if you look at it from a more humanist perspective, and more traditionally what we used to be as human beings, maybe we still are, we still want to be, we like to have trust in a way that we know this person has our back, right? They will defend us even when we're not there. And they'll do the right things for us.
So when you say we have trust with the system, are you referring to the bot or that we're talking to? Or are you referring to the company behind that bot? Or what are you referring to?
I think the idea of a company will get conflated with the AI itself that represents the company.
Okay.
And the trust will be in that combo, right? And therefore the ethical stance, the values of the founder and all that, it is part and parcel of this thing. You cannot have a founder that wants to take advantage short term of the trust that people have given him, and then expect to build a long-term trust-based business, a trust node, as I refer to these things.
Actually, that's kind of true even of the past 20 years, right? I think back in the day when Google was, I remember 2004 was when I graduated from Stanford, and it was a popular but not super popular place to go work at.
Yes.
And I remember their ethos was don't be evil.
Yes.
And on one hand, you were like, what kind of silly sounding, obvious thing is this? Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's really prescient, right? Because it's become this monopoly in our lives. And if you're giving information to it every day, like 10 times a day, you kind of want to make sure that this guy has your back, to your point, right? And at this stage, as you say, you're not even having like intimate conversations with it, although your searches might be very revelatory.
Yes.
So I hear what you're saying. So I guess your point is that we want to be able to trust whatever we're interacting with.
Yes.
And if deeper conversations is one of the tools with which we're going to have engender trust or have a relationship, then all the more I guess you want to be able to feel like this system or bot or whatever it is has your back.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
So it's clear how you demonstrate I've got your back, right? So we talk about headhunting AI, right? So I have a company called Glens. It's a headhunting company. It's a recruitment company, and one of the things we're thinking of building is something we call Uncle Glens, right? So Uncle Glens is your first of all your purpose coach, right? So when you're a high school kid, Uncle Glens talks to you and helps you figure out what to do with your life. Do you want to be an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer, right? Or if you have homework that you don't understand, Uncle Glens can help you. At some point, Uncle Glens helps you to apply to college, all free, right? At some point, when you are graduating from school, from college, you ask Uncle Glens, Uncle Glens, I'm graduating next year. Can you help me find a job? Right? Right there, there's a transaction for you to take, right, and make some money for the 5-6 years you've invested in this kid, right? The marginal cost of intelligence should be quite low in a few years' time, right? So that it's not that much of an investment, but you've built trust over that period of time. Now you've got trust from that kid for your competence because most of the stuff you've been telling him is correct, right? But here's how you go the extra step. When you work with a kid to find his first job, you could, and if it happens in reality that the first couple of jobs that really, really matches this kid's, what the kid likes, salary, the combination is ideal for this kid, but you can't make any money out of it. You should just go ahead and tell the kid, look, these jobs are ideal for you. If I've talked to you for 6 years, I know you're going to love these jobs. I'm going to help you get one of them. But let's make some backups, right? Have some backups, and these are jobs that you will still enjoy. And but I don't make it. I don't make any money from the first two, but these three I could make money, right? But we'll get you those jobs.
Yeah. You know what's really funny? It does remind me of real relationships, right?
Yes.
Very often in life, we make friends, we make business acquaintances. You try not to, make your first interaction transactional.
Yes.
Right? And usually you do that partly because you don't know each other as much, but often because you want to build trust before you actually do a transaction with them.
Yeah.
And so I think, what you're saying reminds me of real life, where right? The first thing I meet you, I don't say, hey, Peng, give me a job, right? Or Peng, invest in my company. I actually sought you for advice first, build, I don't think I ever asked you for money, but
I didn't have a job you want.
No, but even then, right? It's taken us 10 years actually to do something together, right?
Yeah.
So it does, you often invest in things because you want to build trust and also get to know the other person.
We've come about this way through eons of working together with other human beings. It's built into our DNA. We kind of instinctively understand what trust is, right? All we're doing here is just articulating trust as these two pieces of things. And either of them going away in a relationship diminishes trust, right? And then the question is, can you do this with an AI and a human, right? And I think we've got enough evidence that this is possible.
Actually, it's really interesting that I would love to deep dive on this example, actually. But, I was just thinking that many of us in life would love to have a career coach. And I think it's something that we usually get maybe at high school before you graduate. You get, you get university counseling.
I never
Most
had one.
schools have bad ones, by the way.
But
then you get it for half an hour, right? And then maybe even university, if you're lucky, your career counseling office is good. Again, maybe you get half an hour, right? If you even have a good counseling office. And then after that, you're left to the wilderness.
Yes.
Who do you consult for the rest of your life? And to be honest, you often end up talking to your parents, who, by the way, may not have very much
knowledge in
what
you're
you're doing, And very often want you to be a doctor or a lawyer because
Yes.
that's what is safest for the child, and you genuinely don't get advice
Yeah.
actually. So
I think there'll be a bunch of these domains where it's very important to us, but it's very difficult to get advisors, coaches for these areas. Everywhere from relationships to your purpose, which is your job in your career, and then your purpose, from your finances, money, finances, and freedom, right? Your friends. Relationships and connectedness, deep connectedness, even something as simple as your house, which is your home, which is your sanctuary.
Yep.
How do you treasure that, right? How do you get that in a state where you feel there's someone you can talk to help you improve these areas?
So I really want to talk about each of these domains, and I think that will also help us understand the concepts better. But just before we go into any of more examples, just to make sure I understand it as well,
We're
right?
going to do a few
A few more podcasts
these
so that everyone
domains too,
understands. But make sure that everyone understands it
Sure.
better as well, right? So you're saying that intelligence is commoditized.
Yes.
What you believe will have
Defensibility,
defensible
to talk
value
about it.
will be having proprietary information about people.
Yeah.
And already there are some companies, many companies arguably, that have proprietary information about people. But to date, most of them probably are transactional.
Yeah.
And insofar as they have deeper insights of you,
Observational, yeah.
it's based on observational data, right? I guess the best examples would be like Netflix. They
Yeah.
might know what is
Or
recommended
Google.
movies.
Yeah.
Google's probably the best example because
Yeah.
most of us spend our lives on it. But they can infer a lot from you.
Yeah.
But they probably can't have they can't double check on certain things on you. They can't have deep conversations with you.
Yes.
So your argument is technology is allowing for those deep conversations to happen
Yes.
at scale, but also arguably at low cost to the machines. And as such, there's really an opportunity here to build a relationship
Yeah.
with someone and build trust over time. And that trust will allow the machines to learn more about you, but as you said, you also can choose which machine you talk to, right?
Yes.
So you want to choose to the one that is both competent, but also that you have trust with over time.
Have your back.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. But and also, so I think this is the opportunities for startups, right? You don't build sort of generic machines or generic advisors to someone. You could like as we talked about how some of our friends use ChatGPT as an advisor in general. But if you go down things like your career or finances and all that, you probably want a specialist. You typically won't go to some Uncle Joe to talk about how to plan for your life savings, right? For retirement, etc. Unless, of course, Uncle Joe is a financial advisor, right? So I think life in a few years' time will be peppered with these expert AIs in certain domains, and they will have very deep conversations with you about what you want to do in those domains and actually help you out in terms of technically, right, getting you the right pieces together so you can plan for your retirement, you can plan to buy a house, you can work on your relationships with your friends and family. And
Do you mind if I play devil's advocate for
Sure.
a second? So some people might say, not everyone is willing to spend the time to
Sure.
have deep conversations, right? And I think that's sometimes why this observational data can be useful
Yes.
too, right? I don't actually have to tell you. Some people may not be self-aware, in order to tell them what they want, right? So, I think the question is how much time does one have to invest in order to get
Yeah.
answers, right? I think a lot of people will be like, give me a job. I don't want to have to tell you about my deeper
Yes.
motivations.
But you care to make more money.
Who cares to make money?
The person who wants a job.
I do. I would like more money.
There you go. That's the beginning of the conversation.
I see. So it doesn't have to be some philosophical thing.
No.
It could be, I'll get you a job,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get you a job that you're going to make more money in, but I have to ask you some questions in order to help you get there.
And then you can coach that person on, well, if you want to make a bit more money given your qualifications, maybe you should do this and that. Maybe you should get this diploma, right? Or it only takes 6 months to do it part time. Right? Stuff like that you might not know unless you know the the employers, for example.
Actually, the right question to ask the person is also very important, right?
Yes.
A good coach is good at getting information out of
That's
you
right.
or giving you frameworks with which to
Yes.
think about the problem.
Yeah, imagine these AIs, the most patient, thoughtful, consistent coaches you're going to get.
And adapt it to your style.
Adapt
Some
it to
people
your
might want a more analytical style, some people might want a
Yeah.
more empathetic style,
Yeah,
for example.
they'll talk to you and figure out, okay, I need to be more analytical with you, right? And with me, you need to be more cheerleading.
Interesting. So, so now that I guess I've broadly understood the concept, right, where we're building relationships to get proprietary information of people in a trustworthy, I got your back manner.
Yeah, the
No?
way you say it feels Machiavellical.
Machiavellian.
The reason, so you really have to have someone's back, right? Because the reason you want that information is actually to help that person.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line, right?
But
yep.
yes, and in that process
Yep.
of helping that person, you might benefit.
Yep.
You might not,
Interesting.
right?
Interesting.
And you should
Yep.
choose to benefit that person the most.
I see what you're saying. Again, going back to analogy of human relationships, right? There's some people who keep helping and never really expect anything in
Yeah.
return.
But it's really cheap to help now, see?
It is really
if you
cheap
don't
to
get
help.
anything in return, you got goodwill. And they might introduce you to other people. So you got to play the human game now, right? If you play the transactional game, you'll lose. That's the whole point I'm making with this
So
idea.
the point at which you choose to make money, though, has to be very thoughtful, no?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's the product designer / AI's
Yes.
job to figure that out?
So you have this what we call give-take cycle in any relationship, right? But in an AI human relationship, there's this give-take cycle where you're giving information, you're giving coaching, you're giving all kinds of things. But at some point you take, right? The ideal give-take cycle is designed in such a way that even when you take, it feels like you're giving.
Actually, this reminds me of all of the things we've learned in mobile app design, for example, or even
Yeah.
like when do you launch advertisements, right?
Yeah.
So Google didn't launch advertisements at the beginning, right? And neither did Facebook,
Facebook,
right? It
yeah.
was much, much later when you really thought the product was so essential in your life.
Yeah.
And it was also designed in such a way that it's, not in your face.
Yes,
That
well-
you were open. Well, now that they're really all
The first
monopolies,
page is
it's the first page, exactly. So now it's become almost the other extreme.
Yeah. So
but-
it feels like you're taking.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So how do you minimize that sense that you're taking in that
Understood.
loop? So the question for the designer is, how do you design a give-take cycles so that even when you take, it feels like you're giving?
Ooh, very interesting. But as you said, right, if each Uncle Glynn's is empowered to, with the give-take algorithm, they could decide when it is the right time. And maybe for some people, it's never the right time.
Uncle Glynn's is a little bit easier because when you take, you're actually giving.
True.
So that not a lot of design to do, right? You just make sure that you're finding this person the best job they can have, and tell them to stay in their job if you don't have one that's better than the current one.
Understood.
Right?
Yep.
But when they do shift, right, you make the placement fees.
Understood.
on that person.
And as you said, the beauty of this is that we don't have this person in our lives. Even if we could afford it, it would take time to find the
one,
right
build a
person.
trust,
Yeah, for them to
exchange the
understand you,
information.
they would also have to understand your career trajectory, right?
Yeah.
So in my case, it's a combination of being in the U.S., China, Singapore, investor, founder,
Indonesia.
Maybe that's why I ended up talking to you. But there's not so many, right? Of
Yes.
people who are also willing to do it.
Yes.
Right? You happen to be
Well,
a fairly
an AI will be willing to
nice
do it.
person, but you also have limited time.
Yeah.
So that's one of the beauty of this. So career coach is a great example. Maybe just for everyone's sake, another example would be helpful, right? Yep.
Another one that's kind of obvious, which I alluded to earlier, is a finance coach, right? When you first graduate from school, what do you know about financial planning? What do you know
That's
about
very true.
investing?
That's
what do
very
you know?
true.
So there's a lot you can teach that individual, even when the individual's in school, right? And carry that relationship all the way. There's a lot of things you can do to deepen that relationship over time. And ultimately, you want to help this person
Manage their money.
and retire early and
depending on what their goals are.
Yeah, I use the term freedom when I talk about money. The idea of money is not just to make more of it, or not even to make more of it, is to free you up to do the things you want to do. Right? So having that conversation on what is what money does in your life, and what your finances look like, and then ultimately what your freedom looks like when you have the finances to do that. I think this might sound like a luxury idea, but it's not.
It's
right?
not. It's not.
People's lives are ruined because they didn't think about it early enough.
I remember my first job. I was working for McKinsey in New York, and I think after one year of working, it was very funny. We decided there were like 35 analysts, and we decided, somehow it was appropriate to discuss how much money we had in our banks after 1 year. And there was a huge discrepancy, ranging from zero to like more than what you earned in the bank.
Because he was investing.
Because he was investing. And then the zero, I was like, how is that possible? And some people just spend what they earn. Yeah. I was kind of in the middle, where I was like very into the Asian saving mentality, thinking about investing already, but not quite there yet. Yeah. But there was one guy I remember who was like kind of managing his own hedge fund at night in his house while juggling a McKinsey career. Yeah. But I think that really showed to me that there's many ways to manage one's money after 1 year working. And the truth is, no one guided us. Yes. We just discovered this by discovering the fact that our incomes range so widely, actually, or sorry, not our incomes, our savings range so widely. So that's another domain that's ripe for one of these trust AIs to be built out, right? And as you know, financial advisors are generally available to the most wealthy, right? For the most of us, we at best get a financial manager that you speak with for 30 minutes a year.
Imagine being able to give every single professional, or not even professional. It could be a blue-collar worker.
Absolutely.
This is how you think about not having to work beyond 55 or 65 years.
And for some people who might find this very tedious, the financial advisor, as you said, could really take over the management of our accounts too, right?
And once it's built up, depending on your wealth level, $500,000 in your bank account over 10 years, your trust in this AI will be immense, right? In fact, it's made money for you.
So I have a question for you. When I think about the banks I'm using, right, some of it is legacy, right? I'm using DBS or POSB because when I was young, my mom set up an account for me. I just had a child. I think I set up a POSB account right from the beginning because that's the bank. Yes, because I think they send you a letter.
Yeah. Oh, you have a kid. Set up an account.
Yes. And I think you get some government grants. Ah, okay. And so which account does it go to? They'll go to the government's bank, right? Yeah. And then I think by association you think of it as like the children's bank. Yeah. And so, you kind of think of it as, number one, it's government owned. Number two, it's literally where your mom gave it to you since you were a child or a baby. If I were starting a company today, right, and I wanted to build a financial app or whatever it is that engenders trust, how would I do that and compete against these institutions that have been around for such a long time and are associated with trust? Right, governments, not everywhere, but many places might be associated as trustworthy.
I think we use the term trust kind of loosely sometimes. In this case, you said trust because you think they're competent. It's not because you think they have your back. Right?
Okay.
Most people don't think banks have our back. I don't know if
That's
you do.
That's probably true, yeah.
Because they'll increase fees without checking with you if you're okay with it.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
They'll shut your... have you heard the term debank?
Not deeply, but go on, yeah.
Debank means the bank says, I don't want to do your business.
Oh, okay.
Please shut your account down and here's your money back, right? They don't have your back from that point of view. The problem is any scaled up business to date, right? It's next to impossible to build a highly trustable institution from the definition of trust we just used. You can build a highly competent institution, but it's very difficult to demonstrate I've got your back through 1 million customers, 10 million customers. It's very, very difficult. Some do approach that, but very hard. Right? So almost by definition, if you wanted to start a new bank, right, you shouldn't do this transactional stuff like all the other new banks are doing. Right? You should start thinking about how to every customer you have, how to keep them for life. Right? Because the cost of building that relationship is diminishing very quickly, right? And so in other words, you want to start shifting your thinking from a transactional business model to a relational business model.
Wow. Again, can you give us an example to make, be it in the career space or the finance space of how you might,
The neobanks today is a good example, right? How do you build a digital bank today? They don't do it any differently than existing banks, except they use
no physical location very often.
No physical location, and they use online techniques to acquire their customers.
Yep.
But it's totally transactional, and huge problems now. They have huge deposits, and they have to pay these, very nice interest rates, and they can't make money, right? Because they haven't figured out how to loan the money out. All kinds of challenges, right? And I think the trick is to start rethinking about what a bank should be, right? A bank shouldn't be just a place to put money. It could be a financial advisor for
I see
your
what you're
entire
saying.
life.
I see what you're saying. I guess if I was starting from scratch, firstly I would want to understand your objectives, to be honest. I would probably ask you some hard questions, actually, right? Because, financial freedom is a very easy word to throw around, right? But like, why does that matter to you?
Yeah.
At what age do you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
What does financial freedom mean? Like, what do you want your life to look like? Why?
Yes.
Right? And depending on whether you're willing to go down that rabbit hole with me,
Yes.
the answers might be, what does security mean to you, right? And by understanding all these questions, sometimes it might even mean like understanding your childhood growing up, you know?
Yep.
And by having these questions, I really help you get to the core of what it means for you to feel secure, the core of what it means for you to feel independent, and then we start doing your financial planning.
I think you're starting to get at the difference between businesses that used to exist before and the future businesses we're going to be building. The ones that are successful will cut deeply into what we think of as being human, our sense of identity. In fact, I call these domains where we can do this using AI as our identity domain.
Interesting. I think that's a great example versus like a bank today, which is literally where I deposit my check, right? That's kind of growing up, like, my baby again, using that example.
Yeah.
The bank is where I put the ang pao.
Yes.
If it's not where I put the
Explain
safe.
ang pao.
Ang pao being the red packet. So when you're a child, you get, cash from relatives, friends who, it could be like a gift, right? And as opposed to a gift, they give you cash to wish you happy birthday, to celebrate your birth. And I literally have a bank account so that I can store their money. But, that's very different from what we were saying just now, which is like, what are my objectives for my child's? Maybe by the age of 18, I would like her to, have money to be able to go to university.
Yeah, I don't want to pay for your college. Just save enough for you.
Or maybe I want to teach her about investments along the way, starting from the age of 10. And maybe I want to teach her about earning, from the age of whatever, right? And depending on my goals for her, and 18 she can decide for herself, for example, how I might chart that journey might be very different. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Here's a real question for you in terms of what will happen in the future. At what point do you think we'll see kids growing up with AI to the point where they'll trust the AI more than they'll trust their parents?
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yeah.
So I run a social commerce platform, right? And live streaming is a part of it. So, we've been talking about how to help humans. This is the AI doing efficiency bit, right? Help humans who have, after 4 hours of talking, it's very tiring to keep live streaming. So I was talking about avatars. And I was talking about it to my sister, who has 2 9-year-olds. They're twins. And I thought my sister was, she's not in my field. I thought she would like zone out a little. But she said, oh yeah, my daughter is using character.ai. And I was like, whoa, I was like, that's in my competitive analysis sheet, and she's already used it. So I said, do you mind? And she said, I only heard about it because she used my email to register. And so I found out that she was using it. Okay, great. So I said, do you mind if I interviewed her so that I can understand her thinking? So I called her and she said, I asked her, she said, oh, you know AI is generated by humans, right? 9-year-old talking to me. I said, oh yeah, okay, thanks. I said, how did you discover character.ai? I said, I was using YouTube and it was mentioned, and I have a Japanese anime character, I forget the name, that I'm really into, so I use character AI to talk to him. But I know, this channel is generated by a human, is basically what she was trying to tell me. I said, okay, great. And then I said, what was your experience? And she said, oh, it was great, but, at some point it broke character, and it started saying weird things, so I decided it wasn't worth talking to it anymore. And so I logged out and looked for other platforms to talk to this character.
Okay.
I was like, you're 9 years old, you understand that there's different there's humans behind AI, that the AI has a character and that it can break character. That's very multiple layers of reality for a 9-year-old to understand.
Even the term break character.
I was shocked when she used the word break character. It's not even something we talk about or use very frequently as, 40-something or 50-something year olds. So I was shocked that she said that. She'd already used this thing. And it reminded me when I first heard about TikTok many years ago. It was through a 9-year-old who was using it. She was using Musical.ly, which was then acquired by TikTok.
Yes,
and I think the children of today are really interacting it, not just using the tools earlier, but understanding the concepts much deeper.
Yeah.
Right?
And they will understand that this is an AI.
It is.
But it's competent and it's got my back. And they'll still be okay with it being an AI.
She's on Roblox all the time.
There you go.
And, I said, how many friends do you have there? She said, I have 80, but 8 of them are my real friends, and the rest are my virtual, real friends who no one knows who they're, but they're not my real friends.
They might be robots.
But the fact that at 9, she has all these semi-virtual or real friends, and she kind of knows the distinction, that she's talking to characters, and she knows there's AI versus not, I found it amazing.
My point, though, is that she probably still has not got a friend that's an AI. At some point, some kid will start having a friend that's an AI.
I think she was willing to befriend the AI, but it broke character.
It broke character, that's what she said.
So it wasn't good enough.
Yeah,
that's the point,
not
right?
competent.
It wasn't competent.
Yes.
So she was willing to talk to it for as long as it was within character and won her heart.
Yeah.
Right?
There you go.
Yes. So I think given that people, she's a great example of a child at the age, proactively making friends, and believing in it, but still kind of briefly understanding the difference.
Yes.
As you said, the financial advisors, we can really shape them to be talking to them.
Yes,
I
think we will
all the time. She does. She commands Siri. She asks for things.
Just like a handy search.
Like as if talking to a helper or an assistant,
Okay.
right? And I think that if we built some of these tools, I think the way we might approach it for our age versus someone who is 6 years old might be very different too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think at some point there'll be a whole generation of humans for whom some of the entities they trust a lot, right, are not humans. Right? There'll be people in their lives they trust, and a bunch of them will not be humans. They'll be the financial advisor, the career advisor, the relationship coach, and so on.
Do you think though that there will be some domains where people will prefer talking to humans versus not? Will they have that angst or that maybe psychological framework that I should be talking to a human?
I think there'll be a whole bunch of humans that want to talk to humans. I have friends that don't have smartphones. Right? I mean, they walk around with these traditional 2G, 3G phones that don't have a UI.
But they're the minority, is
yes,
what you're really saying.
Small, tiny.
That's
minority.
true. I think a good example also is, back in the day before there were all these influencers, right? People would say, oh, that's this transient trend. But, I met this girl, so I run an influencer business like 10 years, not 10 years ago, like 5 years ago. And she was telling me that her little sister thought Kylie Jenner, who was one of the most popular influencers, is her best friend. And she lives, but this girl lives in rural Australia. She never met her, but I thought about it. And there are many influencers that I follow that I know more about because I see their Instagram every day. Versus even you, because I talk to you once every 3 months, right? So I can see how you start building relationships or one-way relationships.
Yeah, those are one-way relationships.
Yes.
Imagine now
it's two ways.
Two ways, right?
You talk to a virtual Kylie,
yes,
and she starts understanding your needs.
Yeah.
She starts flattering you. She starts,
So I think the part that really needs to be there is have your back, right? There will be people that design AIs that are competent, and they're competent in extracting stuff from you. And at some point, you're going to realize, that it's an extractive product, and you will leave it, right? But it's getting harder and harder to realize that.
But I really like what you're saying, right? Because, as you said, the companies, these institutions, were not designed to be weren't built to be relational at the beginning, because relationships historically have been expensive, because humans are expensive, right? And great relationships are very expensive to maintain.
Yes.
But as that becomes cheaper, I guess, to establish, then if you're building a company today and you want to trust, you might want to start building a relationship off the bat. And through that, take or extract information as much as you want, and then at some point, depending on your give-take loop, as you were saying, decide at which point you want to be, extractive.
Yeah.
Although, as you said, there are some examples where it could actually be, like mutually beneficial.
Yes.
Right? For example, in the headhunter example, while I might make a commission from getting you a job, it's actually beneficial for you too. Yes. As long as this job is really in your best interest.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Another example in the relationship category. If I were your relationship manager, my goal is to help you. I'm an AI. My goal is to help you improve your relationship with 30 or so people you tell me that you care about, right? And I set up dinner for your mom and dad's 50th anniversary, right? You're going to pay me for it. No one expects a free dinner or free lunch for that matter. And you'll be okay with it, because I just saved you so much time.
There's many interesting things that you said in there, actually. So I think the first thing is, back in the day, we had CRM systems, but they were really just repositories of information.
Yes.
Now you can have someone who understands your needs and actually makes the socializing happen for you, depending on how you define it, and organize all that stuff. Through organizing that stuff, they may have to manage your money, or you might give it money to do it for you. And by doing some of that, you'll be grateful to them, but you may want to pay a fee to them along the way.
Or in this case, the restaurant example I gave you, the take rate in a typical restaurant, if you bring in customers, is about 10 to 20%. That's enough to pay for this whole service for 10 years.
Yep. Totally.
So you can just give it away. Right? And if you get one dinner every 6 months, you're making a ton of money.
Do you think businesses or I guess as the coach, but an important point I'm making is the coach not just understands what you want and does it for you, it is mutually beneficial for them to earn money and you do stuff? Some
piece of it has to be mutually
beneficial.
Otherwise, why are you in business?
Yep. And then, but you do entrust them with some of your cash or your money.
You might not even have to.
Oh, okay,
right?
Interesting.
Because there's a restaurant fee you have to pay.
I see.
Right? You have to pay for dinner.
I see. Okay, very, very interesting. And then as time goes by, they know your preferences more and more. And that's how the proprietary information gets deeper and deeper.
Yes.
And some of this might be localized to your district. And so
it could be localized to the people you're entering. Maybe with mom and dad you do this, and then with sister you go to McDonald's or something.
Well, interesting. Okay, I'm very excited actually. This is a brand new world, and I think I've spoken to you about this a few times actually, but I feel like every time I talk to you, I get a better understanding. It's not that easy to understand.
In some ways, it's hard to understand because we've got all this tech strategies in our heads, right? If you just think about yourself as a human being, you're a finance advisor, you are a relationship coach. What would you do, right?
I think the analogy really is, back in the day, close friends. These advisors are people you're going to become close friends with.
Yes.
And historically, you really only do them with humans and with a small subset of humans.
Yes.
But you're saying that businesses can do it now, and by doing so, will build their moats and also be able to add more value to you.
Yes.
I think that's a totally different way of thinking about things. Yeah.
And I guess I could go into this now, but this is my long-winded way of saying the world's going to be a better place.
Wow.
Isn't it so? I mean, if you need to build a competitive, defensible business, you have to build a trust node that millions of people trust. Right? So the world, the level of trust in the world will go up. So the world's going to be a better place. The reason I'm excited about this idea is it's not because I want it to be that way. It's because I think it has to go that way. So nature pushes us in that direction. Once transparency on these big entities become commonplace, right? So transparency, I'm making an assertion here that we didn't discuss yet, but the fact that you have a large company that is trustworthy or that's not trustworthy will be clear to people very quickly in a world of AI.
One thing we didn't touch on, and I don't know if we should at this stage, but if you don't mind,
Sure.
is, one of the things that we're seeing right now is that AI companies are, in the hands of the few, right? And, if we look at even venture funding, right, something like most of the money is going to AI, of which most of the money is going to a few funds,
Yeah.
And, we also see some oligopoly is forming in foundational models, although, as you said, it might actually be commoditized at some point, right?
I think it's...
You think it would be commoditized? I see. So, because where I was going with this was, do you see trust nodes being plentiful in the future? Do
Good
you
question.
see, it being in the hands of the few who control the machines?
I think trust nodes have to start off specialized. Because you cannot be competent at everything all at the same time.
But machines can do machines. Maybe some machines can really gain knowledge in everything, no?
I think, yeah, you might be right, but for the machines to evolve to that point, a lot of these trust nodes would have been built before then, right? So if you wait till that point to start building a trust node, you'll be way behind all the existing trust nodes, right? So I think the rate at which this idea spreads, and this is partly why I wanted to do this podcast, it is knowledge. It is the knowledge, the understanding, some entrepreneur agreeing with this strategy and going out and building this company, right? So how many people go, yeah, I agree with Peng. I agree with
Peng
Wei Qing.
is really here to enlist founders.
I want the world to be a better place faster, right? So the more people that build these businesses, I think the world gets better faster.
Assuming they have good intentions or not necessarily?
Okay, so if you look at it from a game theoretic point of view, if you start building something that's competent but doesn't have your back, people
will
figure out...
discover. That's true. That's true. Actually, that's very true.
And
actually.
even faster in the future, because the AIs will sign on to these things and they'll test it out, they'll talk to other AIs, and transparency, right? We're going to enter a world where almost all businesses will be transparent.
So it's not clear to you how it will look like, let's say, in, 10 years or 20 years' time.
I don't know if you can build huge monopolies on this, because there'll be people that naturally start to realize, oh, you're really big, I'd rather go to a small one.
Yep.
And there'll be small ones that specialize in an area that the big one just didn't think to focus on. And some of this stuff requires local knowledge, like setting up dinner for you, right? So if the company is not operating here, it's hard for them to figure out how to set up dinner for you because they don't know your customs, for example, or your best restaurants, or what kind of food there is in that city, right? So I think there'll be probably thousands, probably millions of these trust nodes, which is good. I think choice is good.
Although one could also argue that, let's say BetterHelp right now, which is not it's a mental health platform, right? One could argue that, they may have many trust nodes, which are these therapists, but maybe BetterHelp, the company, has information at the aggregate level that could also apply to these nodes. So maybe the company, that is kind of behind these trust nodes, and there may be some benefit in having information at the aggregate. Who knows?
I don't know. So long as you really have the users back, I think you stay in good stead to build a big business. I think the tendency will be for people who have their ethics not screwed on quite straight to take advantage of the information they have in the short term and spy more, and as a result lose trust. I think the world in tech the last 30, 40 years have taught us not so good things.
I love how you managed to combine your idealism and your sense of purpose with a business model, with your worldview.
Actually, I would like to correct that. I like
You
to
like to
correct
correct that? Okay, okay.
It's actually not the same thing.
Yep.
I do have a sense of values and all that. That's aligned with what I think will happen.
Yep.
But what I think will happen is different.
Independent.
It's independent
Yep.
of what I think should
Understood.
happen.
Understood.
Right?
Yep, yep. But no, but I'm happy that you've managed to align them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the scary thing is if you have a worldview which does not go in line with your values and you can't come up with a business that makes sense of it,
Yeah.
that would
So
be a
you
weird place
cannot
to be in.
build a business that aligns with your values, right?
Understood.
And that would be a terrible world to live
Understood,
in.
understood. So I guess this is a really great introduction to, I guess, some of the deep thinking that you've been doing
Yes.
on how to build defensible businesses in this new era of commoditized intelligence. And I think, in future podcasts, I guess we can really deep dive into some of these areas,
yeah.
right? Each of them, I think, can be a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
We can invite other people
We should.
We should, right? To challenge our norms, maybe make suggestions.
Yeah.
And
What I really hope to do is give people a sense of how deep technology will cut into our sense of humanity and enable us to be much, much more human, much more easily, right? And hanging on to our relationships with the people we care about. Right?
Yep.
Making our house our sanctuary, right? And so on and so forth.
I think that's one of the most interesting things for me, at least from this conversation, is you could take this conversation in multiple ways, actually.
Yes.
And one of the ways that you have chosen to take it is that, by and being able to build relationships and engendering deeper conversations, it's actually beneficial for humanity, actually.
Absolutely.
People will know themselves better. They will get more help in the areas that they need. We're able to scale help in a way that's very cost effective. But by doing so, we actually help humans get better, I guess, and have better lives.
Feel
and
better.
Feel
Be
better.
better.
And I think
Be
by doing
safer.
so, we also, it might answer some very interesting questions about ourselves, right? Just now,
Yeah.
we're talking about financials. I don't think I've asked myself some of these questions even, right? And if one day I had someone talking to me full time about this, who knows? I might have deeper revelations about myself.
Yes, that's the hope.
That's the hope. All right. So on that very exciting, but also maybe slightly scary note,
It might be scary for some.
It is, right? I think many of us have not pushed the boundaries of ourselves even,
Yeah.
right? And so it's scary, but it's also very exciting, as I think really is the word.
I hope it's exciting for
Most people
listening to this as opposed to scary.
Yeah. And on that note, I guess maybe we should call it a day.
Yes, it's a day.
But I think as we talked, we got more excited, to be honest.
Yes.
I'm very fascinated by what you're saying. And I actually think as a founder, it's also given me ideas of how to think about building businesses, actually.
Yeah.
Right? And I think Peng, as he said earlier, is very interested to find more founders to build businesses
join
alongside
us
him.
if you...
So please, I guess, message in the comments, write to either of us, and let us know what you think, and also if you're interested in participating in this.
Thank you for
All right.
listening.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Ring around the Milky Way, what will happen, who can say? Robots helping day by day, making life a cheerful play. Twinkle, twinkle, robot friend, what new things are around the bend? Questions, answers, big and small, AI helping through it all. Clap your hands and spin around, see what wonders can be found. In the future we will see all the things that AI can be.